To another edition of Tripadvisor Talk. This is a weekly show we've created to talk about what's happening in the travel space with experts from the field. This week, I'm very, very blessed to have four amazing media insiders and travel experts. Mr. Christopher Hill, editor-in-chief of Destination magazine. Ms. Denise Keller, who is a video host and producer, well known to everyone who watches MTV in the past and Discovery Channel. We have Jana Frowley, editor-in-chief of Escape, the largest circulated travel magazine in Australia. And we have Ms. Juliette Kingsman, who is well known to everyone in Europe for her company Boteco, which is a specialist in boutique hotels, eco-boutique hotels, as well as she's a luxury travel specialist. She writes for Condé Nast Traveler, but it's also used to be the editor-in-chief of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I wanted to just throw this out quickly. It's a very basic question, but given that you guys all cover travel for a living, what are you doing now? I mean, what are you covering right now, given that we're all sort of in lockdowns and quarantines around the world?
I can go first. At the moment, we're splitting. At the moment, our activities are solely online while we wait for our next print issue to come about, which will hopefully be in August. So online content for now is basically split between aspirational stories to keep the travel dream alive and news, which is invariably centered on the pandemic. And we're also dipping into some travel trade news as well, just to keep things interesting.
I'm currently in between two post-productions. I had two major productions, one in Europe and another one in Asia. And it's been a bit of a struggle getting into post-production for these travel storytelling commercials, if you would say. Because now the edits have to change. Clients want to re-strategize. A handshake is no longer allowed in a video, or even a hug. So we're constantly fixing things in post-production. It doesn't mean that the story is different. It just means that we have to think differently in how we're going to relay a travel experience to the audience.
I'm actually.
Ladies,
Should I jump in?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So I have to say I've been very busy, I'm happy to say, because I'm someone who's specialized in sustainability and how we can use our travels as a force for good. So I think in this time of contemplation and pause, we're all really thinking about how we can holiday to help heal the world. And also I work with hotels to help them really language what it is that they do that has a positive impact. And I think that will be more important than ever. So I'm happy to say in that way. I should be in India and Bhutan right now filming a new TV series, which is not happening, sadly. But I am writing a book on how to be a greener traveler. So I think we're all finding different ways to make the most of being grounded and at home.
Jana, we saved the best for last.
I'll say in Australia, so we've continued our print product, albeit at a much smaller size than previously. Our print product goes into Metro Sunday papers around Australia. And that paired with our digital property, we're doing a combination of news. We started out and the audience was very keen to get those updates, but soon kind of tired of the really hard news, and they were looking for some entertainment and some light relief. So we've had really great traffic from the memes and the clever things people in the travel industry are doing during lockdown. So whether it's, the G Adventures tour guide who takes you on a tour of his backyard, or a flight attendant who's recreating a flight in her New York apartment, people just love that. Like they just have an insatiable appetite to be entertained. We're also seeing this combination of both nostalgia, so people going through old photos and reposting them in social and sort of reliving the holidays, of yore. But then also now we're starting to see the real dreaming coming through. And in Australia, we're about to go in one of the states, South Australia, last week, they gave everyone the go-ahead to travel within the state, and we will see those rolling changes in the weeks to come. So we'll be supporting that with new content, which I can discuss, I'm sure, later in our talk.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the sort of, the memes and the sort of fun content, the aspirational content, Chris, that you had mentioned. What are some of the things that you've seen that you've enjoyed the most and also have worked well in your own publications that you've put out there that have been really sort of, that have gotten great feedback from the public?
Oh, let's see. What have we done that's been, well, I think the news is actually grabbing most of people's attention at this point. And again, we're trying to, the news we're producing is we're trying not to be too dire about anything. So we're grabbing hold of the more positive factors in the news as that rolls out. Again, our focus, our distribution is Southeast Asia plus Hong Kong, and our editorial remit is similar. We do cover global aspects as well, but it's really, hence the name destination. We focus in on Asia and Southeast Asia more than anywhere else. And, depending upon where you're looking, there's good news to be found. I mean, Hong Kong seems to be pulling itself together. People are dining again. Vietnam has come through relatively unscathed. So those kinds of stories definitely get traction amongst our readership, which again, even online, is heavily weighted towards the region.
Hmm.
Okay.
Jana, do you want to talk about some of the things that have?
Yes, definitely. I think what's really interesting about the stories at this time, especially the ones we're seeing emerge through social media, is, I guess, it's putting our eyes on a way of travel that we may not have thought of before. We're so used to seeing these big, the headline acts in every city and the big sort of, the Eiffel Towers and whatnot of the world. And we're getting this deeper understanding of the people in some countries. We know some people travel and they kind of do that box ticking. And I think the way we're seeing the world come together and the unity, we're all in this together well and truly. And I hope that we will be able to maintain that as we emerge from this, that xenophobia doesn't start to take hold. And so I think we're seeing that different kind of storytelling. And, we've done content where we've tapped into international writers and journalists that we otherwise probably might have left alone in favour of some of the more predictable journalists in the destinations that are typical to travellers. But this really opened up the world. Australians love Bali, but we know it's not Bali. And this has given us a chance to experiment. And so hopefully when the borders all open, Australians will start to fly to all places and not just the ones that they're familiar with.
Mm. But let's talk about when the borders do open. I mean, Chris, I saw a great little piece in Destination talking about the travel bubbles that are emerging.
Yes.
I mean, I'd love to know everyone's opinions here about the idea of the travel bubble, whether you think it's a viable idea. What are your opinions on this possible way of traveling?
I think that's absolutely the way things are going to roll out. That seems to be the conventional wisdom anyway, is that when travel begins to resume, it will begin on a domestic basis, which makes perfect sense, right? People will want to explore their own countries. I imagine road trips are going to be popular where those are possible, perhaps not in Singapore. Well, you can go to Malaysia, of course. But where you can avoid getting in an airport, going on to an airline. I think that's going to be the first phase of the recovery, followed fairly quickly by, again, what they're calling travel bubbles or travel corridors, depending upon whom you talk to. Australia and New Zealand have been talking about this for a couple of weeks now, allowing traffic back and forth those two countries. ASEAN in Southeast Asia, again, in that context, ASEAN is is discussing similar initiatives. So you can imagine there might be, corridors between Thailand and Vietnam, for example, or Singapore and Malaysia, most certainly. So I think that's how travel is going to resume, with the longer hauls travel coming back at a later date. How long? Hard to say at this point. Should I keep talking?
Ladies?
That was my dramatic pause to allow someone else to talk.
Anyone else have any thoughts on these new travel bubbles that are emerging?
I certainly can speak to that. I think, well, exactly what Chris said. I'm always one to try and look at the positives of situations. And obviously I'm speaking to you from London and Europe. And I'm really excited about people, whether we're in Europe, the Americas, Asia, exploring what's on our doorstep. Australia. I'm really excited for Australia being able to support its own industry after the bushfires. As we know, it's going to be a really helpful boost, I think. And I don't think anyone's shortchanged when they explore on their own doorstep. It's also much more sustainable, obviously, not to be, I think, jumping on long-haul flights. Aviation will suffer, certainly, but I think we've become sort of programmed just to zip around the world, do all those really long flights, and we don't necessarily need to. So we've taken this time to really pause, slow down and rethink travel, think more deeply about what we get from our trips. I'm really loving this sort of time to really look at where we can go. I'm looking at Scandinavia from a European perspective, and the UK itself. We have loads on our doorstep. So I think it's really, really exciting. I think there are lots of anthropological and sociological benefits of really understanding our closer to home communities as well. So that's a nice aspect. And in terms of it being, which places are opening, well, again, I speak in Europe, and from a sustainability point of view, I'm looking forward to being able to travel to Italy, France, Spain, and Greece, who really, really rely on tourism from that perspective. I think there are more people employed working within tourism in Greece than anywhere else. Italy and France probably have the most sort of money in those businesses. And I feel like we all certainly owe it to Italy to give them our love as they were the ones to be first hit by this. So yeah, in terms of bubbles. And again, exactly, we'll just travel slightly differently. We'll look at traveling by water, by rail, and it's a fun opportunity. It's the anticipation and the planning that brings us more joy now, rather than doing everything so quickly.
And as content creators, you must be planning ideas and stories, shows that anticipate this sort of new way of traveling. Like Denise, have you been thinking about what's the kind of show that I can pitch to a network? What's the kind of content I want to produce based around the new way that we're going to have to travel and still excite people, but still make it actually feasible for them to travel?
It's a very good point that you make there. It's not so much about the travel idea, like how we used to see travel shows where one person goes from one place to another. What we're seeing right now is how we can tell a story through human connections. And that human connection is so isolated right now. I mean, we're in this virtual room having this chat about travel, wanderlusting, yet most of my clients have come back and said, we don't want to lose that connection to our people, our members. We want them to come back. We're worried that we can't explain to them how connected we are to them. And so as a content creator, we have to develop short little 15 sizzlers to tell the story of how we connect again back to each other. And I think that is a priority now with most of my clients. And on that note, Julia, you actually have a very, very good point. Sustainability is major, major, major. Every client of mine has said, we need to tell a story about environment and we need to save our environment. We have to think outside the box. We have to re-strategize ecotourism. We have to enhance it and we have to amplify it, because now is the perfect opportunity to say we've given Mother Earth a nice little break. All right, let's try and keep that momentum going without destroying further. And how can we tell that story? So Currently, I'm doing one major project in the Maldives, and it is a sustainable luxury resort. The narrative has changed significantly, and now it's all about how can we protect our ecosystem on the atolls, as well as the connection to the ocean, so coral reef line planting, as well as how can we bring people back and be involved in that. So how can we get them enticed to go diving as opposed to just like leisure diving, but rehabilitating the coral reef, as an experience. So it's an interesting time, and I like this mindfulness. I like this thought process right now in content creation, and it makes me a little sharper as a filmmaker, because what we used to do was just like put the camera there, destination, ooh, yay, everyone's happy and everyone's excited, and yeah, it works. It works. It's tangible. But now, if we are not telling a meaningful message and not connecting with that story, because we've taken travel for granted for so long, it's imperative. I like this. I like this period now of thought process.
I completely agree. Oh, sorry, Juliet. I completely agree. I think it's almost like we've been put on a travel diet and or a fast of sorts, and then by eliminating the kind of, I don't know, some of the holiday processes or holidays we've chosen, holiday in a box, so regularly, needing to be somewhere all the time. I think that we've had this chance to really assess what's important to us, and even in my family. So I've got a husband and two teenage kids, and we thankfully all get on, and we spend a lot of time at dinner talking about what's important to us, what we want to do when we come out of this. And I think just we've been accommodating holidays. You hurry towards it, and it's this pace has always been frenetic. And now I think hopefully our lives will slow down. Fingers crossed we can maintain that for a while. Then, as Denise says, think a little bit more about why we're traveling and what we want to get out of it.
I think all I wanted to add, if it's okay, is really with sustainability, what's really important. I mean, that's a word we hear all the time, and it's obviously not a lens that's new to me through which to look at travel, is remember that sustainability isn't just the environment, and it isn't just about conservation, and that is an amazing, massive part of it. But actually, in terms of sustainability, when you look at sort of humans using, resources and trying to forge a world that's better, it's the social and economic sustainability that's critical at this point. And it's really thinking about how can our travels help with wealth distribution, and looking at the supply chains. Who am I giving my money to? Who is it helping? So I think it's really key with sustainability. Yes, I absolutely celebrate all the projects with coral reef preservation and thinking about our impact, not being negative, but being positive. But actually, you can really take a sustainable holiday without it really involving environmental sustainability. It's key to think about that. So one would be going to a hotel that supports the education of young women in remote rural areas, because by doing that, you're helping those communities in a much greater way. So I think sustainability, we need to all really understand what that means in so many different ways.
Chris, any thoughts?
Sorry, Anne.
No, Jana, please go ahead.
I was going to ask then a follow-on, said Juliet, which is I think the cruise industry. We've seen a lot of cruise companies in the news, and the workers and so the employees of the cruise companies. I think that's been a very interesting part of this, and the spotlight that's been shone on the working conditions and the like. And I'll be interested to see how the cruise companies deal with a lot of these stories that have been coming out in the past few months. So I guess I'm raising that as a discussion point.
So I would love to just say quickly about cruising. So I would urge people, I know people are really dedicated, they love their cruises, and I can understand why. But if you look at a cruise, first of all, they generally registered offshore, so they don't, their employees don't have rights, so there isn't social sustainability there. So imagine if we could get all the people who are on cruises just to reconsider, maybe I will go stay somewhere that really invests in conservation. The other thing with cruises, of course, is that because of international legislation, they can just dump whatever they like into our beautiful oceans 4 miles off any coastline. So I'm sorry to all the cruises, I'm very outspoken about that. But until cruisers are held to account, they should be more responsible. And if you just think, all that money I'm going to give to a cruise, how about I invest that in a project in Asia or Africa that is doing wonderful things for the environment? That would be my thought. Sorry, cruise industry.
Touchy subject.
Fair points.
And the buffets, who wants to go near those right now, right?
Indeed. It is my understanding, though, that demand for cruises for 2021 is already up and strong. And so, yeah.
That's why I don't feel bad saying it.
Oh, dear.
I'm not thinking of a sinking ship. That ship is still bobbing away quite happily.
Well, there's one positive note here in Singapore. 2 of the mega cruise ships that came from Hong Kong is helping Singapore with our COVID situation. As you probably have read, we've got a massive spread or a second wave of COVID-19 spread with our migrant workers. And these 2 ships are docked there for these migrant workers to live in. And they are receiving, their meals and their Wi-Fi so that they can, call back home. This is used as a 2-week stay home kind of location. And I've had the privilege to work with the government to narrate this story. So, this SG Cares, we're coming together. So we don't want to punish cruise ships and make them look like the evil of travel. They are trying to do their best, and I think this was one great way of a cruise company coming forward and trying to help. So, yeah, but it is a very controversial subject, Juliet. I can understand.
And also, to all of our points about community tourism and re-engaging with each other, I mean, you're really engaging with people a little bit too much on a cruise, but they're people you already know. They're from your communities. You want to really be, I think, you don't really engage with destinations and cultures. So it's just thinking differently. Look, I'm hoping cruises are listening to this and can adapt and just think about their impact. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to shame anyone, but we're talking about what matters and purposeful. And I'm sure with creative people, they can think about how can they just, mitigate their negative impact and how can they be a more positive force within travel. That's all I'm asking.
I mean, I think to everyone's point, it would be wonderful if everyone, when restrictions are lifted, everyone starts looking at travel as more meaningful, as a way to sort of get out there, to be purposeful, to sort of give back to communities. But is that really going to happen, or is that going to be for a few months, and then the backpackers are going to go out again, and people are going to go? Is rampant tourism going to be back within a year? Or do you think there really is a global shift in mindset going on right now?
I imagine it's the segment of the market that you look at. There have, of course, people have been trying to predict. We've had a taste now of what some of these destinations, Barcelona, Venice, are like without tourists. So is over-tourism a thing of the past now that we have had a taste of that? Honestly, I doubt it very much. I think things will gradually, as soon as it's safe to travel again, once there are vaccines available, etc., then things will just swing back in terms of mass tourism anyway. Things will swing back to the way they were, unfortunately. But for other segments of the market, I hope the pursuit of more meaningful, more experiential, more sustainable travel definitely sinks in. I mean, I think all of us have been covering these kind of stories for years now. I'm hoping that that in the post-COVID era, there will be at least one segment of the traveling population that's more receptive to that message and more hungry for those kind of stories.
I think the younger generation.
I agree.
Sorry,
you go.
No, I think the younger generations are going to sit up and take a lot of notice, and they're going to be the change makers of the future. Mm-hmm. So let's be optimistic and keep saying that until it happens.
I love the attitude, Juliet. There was actually a little backstory here in Southeast Asia. A lot of social media influencers who were, they travel social media influencers received a lot of negative backlash for posting all of their gorgeous, beautiful images during COVID. And I think that has definitely made them think a little harder about what they're posting, because you can't just put a beautiful picture out there and look at me, this is an amazing experience. I think their story has to be certainly more meaningful, because they were under a lot of attack. And we're talking about social media influencers that had like 500,000 followers, 1 million followers, and received so much negative backlash for posting beautiful images without thinking what to say about the future. So,
wisdom. We need more wisdom,
yeah.
You be a person of influence.
I think one of the interesting things, though, about what will happen next is will relate to the affordability of travel. So we can see the massive economic downturn, and it will be interesting to see even if there was a vaccine next week, what that looks like in terms of people's ability to pay for a holiday. Certainly from the Australian perspective, we've been going through this golden age, and it's been really affordable to fly, across the world, but prices that were unheard of 15, 20 years ago, where it was a month's wage to fly to London or whatever it might be. And I think that that's where it will be interesting to see what the people who either don't have the money to spend will do within their domestic environment, but then also the people whose circumstances haven't changed at all, and where they'll go and whether they'll make the meaningful holiday decisions that we've been talking about, because now they can and they've got the resources to do so.
I think it's about values for money, not just value for money. And, I'm all for the democratization of travel. It's wonderful. But I just think, suppliers, businesses need to be held accountable for that impact. And, it will just change. And you're right. Look, mass tourism will come back, and that's a great thing. Everyone has a right to see the world, and it's really, really a powerful way of making the world a better place, educating each other. But mass tourism has become too cheap. I don't mean to be elitist saying that, but if you look at aviation, that is non-taxed on their fuel, and is that fair from the point of view of the planet? I sound like such a sort of activist, but I'm asking that genuinely. Is that fair? Is that right?
Do you think that airlines, in order to survive, are going to have to drive prices up to the point where air travel is going to be a luxury spend, or something you save up for a long time for?
It's the key question, isn't it?
I don't think anyone has a crystal ball on that. I mean, if every airline is adopting different measures, from what I understand, at least in Southeast Asia, they're considering, blocking seats. So that ultimately means your flight ticket will go up because you can't fill the entire plane. And we're also so used to that in Asia, in Southeast Asia, with budget airlines, like everything is a bus stop away. We looked at planes as like, that's just a little hop to Bali, a little hop to KL. I don't think it's going to be a hop anymore. I think it's going to be a little bit more expensive. And I don't think everyone's going to be able to afford it. And we're also talking about a time where, are we going to be having, COVID-19 passports and vaccines and tests at the airports? Our check-in area is going to be contactless. It's very complicated. So, like I said, no one really has a crystal ball on the airlines yet, but they're certainly having a really hard time.
Indeed. yeah, and what happens to fares in the future will have of course a massive impact. One suspects that they can only go up. I mean, at this moment, I think most people are expecting that the majority of flag carriers will survive, but they will survive through state bailouts. I think Air France KLM just got $10 billion rescue package from the French and Dutch governments. Singapore Airlines was up there too, and these are all coming ultimately from taxpayers' pockets. Julia mentioned before the fuel taxes, which are very hard, have been traditionally very hard to justify, and those will likely have to weaken through public outrage, public demand, and the cost of that will again have to be, put on the consumer. So I think rising fares are probably not too far off in our future.
I think I always I don't want to sound elitist. I'm really not. I'm originally Canadian, so I'm a very egalitarian person. But I think what we have to understand with tourism is, ideally what you want are less people traveling, spending more money in terms of wealth distribution, in terms of our impact. And I don't mean to say that travel will be more exclusive. I just think that we'll travel less, but we'll travel better. And it will be quality over quantity. So when we do take those trips, they are longer trips. We invest more in those. So we're not all shuffling around all the time, scattering, money. It's just it's more regulated and controlled. And I don't think that's a terrible thing to have to save up for holidays once again, And I think this time has taught us to find a lot of happiness within ourselves and not always be seeking these quick trips. And, obviously my heart breaks because 10% of the world is employed in tourism. So how will that work? How will that change? But we will all just have to slightly adapt, and hospitality will adapt. It's not the end of travel, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
I'm
that
intrigued to.
Oh, sorry, Jana.
I was going to say I'm intrigued to sort of, we had that crystal ball, which we've just done a crystal ball edition of Escape for this Sunday. So I don't know if we've got any of the answers. But travel insurance is another one that I'm intrigued to see what that will look like, and how it will affect the places we go. So you look at the situation in the US at the moment, or any of the other hotspots around the world where we're seeing, really high cases, and the impact that will have on their health systems, and in turn what that will look like for us planning a trip. I don't know, the affordability in Australia of health insurance is small compared to what you're paying for the package as a whole. But I'll be interested to see what percentage of the trip that looks like. And so when we are planning, that's another layer of saving that we have to add into the equation.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think that a lot of the way that people look at, what are the necessities when they're planning a trip are going to change. Travel insurance is a big topic that I think we all either take for granted or don't even think about sometimes when we travel. Yet it's becoming, and will become, I think, a really important part of the equation now.
Especially for older travelers, which is, we know that because it will be harder for them to get insurance because they're more susceptible. But as you say, without, we can't predict this. It will just change. I think we need to make sure there are lots of really great trips which feel risk-free for the older traveler. I think Australia, I've been thinking about that. I think Australia will be a really wonderful destination, certainly within people in Asia. It's pretty risk-free, and it's we'll just rethink what our exotic is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that the way that consumers are going to plan, that they're going to do research or get inspiration for trips, is it going to change now? Now that, as you said, people will probably travel a bit less, but travel better. do you see the way that people get inspired, the research they do and planning will change?
Online's up.
Okay,
85%.
I was going to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I do think what this of boredom for some people has created is it does open our minds to, podcasting, for instance, different social media accounts that in the past we may not have actually gone down that path. But now you start following one hashtag and it leads to another and it leads to something else. And I think that that's possibly the breadth of our research will change, and we'll just look to different sources, because now we know that they're available. Like we're familiar in a way that in the past, if you were working, a 12-hour day, and you've just handed everything over to the travel agent, now we've taken joy in looking at the world because we have a little bit more time. We're not, spending 2 hours on the train or the tube or the bus or whatever getting to and from work. And we can use that time for different things. And if travel is your thing, then hopefully, you're illuminated in a new way as a result of this COVID situation.
I think that's also really interesting right now here in Singapore, because Singaporeans in general are looking for good deals. And a lot of companies now are offering book for 2021. And if you book this now, you will get extra credits and extra this and maybe an upgrade and a this. And it's just like all these extras. So Singaporeans are looking at it and going, well, if I get that one, I get a bonus with that. So, but if I get this one, I get a double bonus with that. So I hear a lot of chatter of how can I make the experience based on what they can afford and the affordability. A lot of resorts and hotels have massive discounts now and sending out lots of EDM saying book for 2021, $1,000 off for 4-night stay. So I know from my friends who are dying to travel, they're going a little crazy at home. They want to go to their usual places like Bali or Thailand just to go on a beach. Singapore, we can circumnavigate this island in 20 minutes. So we're desiring to look for that ASEAN experience, but it's certainly going to be about a deal and what we can afford, because the economy is also quite bad right now. I've just been hearing a lot of people losing jobs, and being able to afford a trip now is far-fetched. It's not as easy.
Christopher, Juliet, any thoughts?
I'm good.
So as you guys plan, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. No, I was just to cap it off, like people here in Singapore are looking for super deals. Their research is how I can get the best out of my money, because they foresee travel is going to be expensive, and it's the reality.
It's funny because you'd think consumers would have wised up by now to the fact that things can be cheap, but it's all smoke and mirrors, really. Businesses, you get what you pay for generally. And so, I understand cash flow, that people will be pledging, great offers now for credits in the future for their cash flow, their business. So that will be a great deal. But generally, I find in this world, people, you get what you pay for. And I think looking at, as I always say, values for money, not just value for money, and investing in a good business will serve people better. And it's more rewarding, actually. It's more an enriching experience once they're there, and the anticipation and knowing that they're paying for, it's the same in any luxury goods, or when you're buying food. If you look at food and your ingredients, you get what you pay for. I can get a huge tub of fried chicken and this, that, and the other for not much. But, what is that? So I hope consumers will wise up to the fact that sometimes it's better to know you're paying a bit more if you know where that money's going. But for yourself, your own experience, not just for the greater good.
Anyone?
I'm thinking about fried chicken now. Sorry.
Yeah, me too. I was like, bucket of fried chicken.
You've got great fried chicken in Indonesia. Indonesian
We
fried
have the
chicken is the
best.
best.
We have the best here. The national dish, I guess.
But I mean, one of the things, we'll probably end this off pretty soon, but I want to get a sense of, journalists, people in the media are always, one of the things that's easy to sort of push to the public are listicles, sort of trend stories, top tens, this is the hot list. It's really hard right now because everything's sort of in a situation where we don't know what's going to happen next. But are there in your minds already certain destinations, certain trends that we should be paying attention to?
I mean, I'd love to see the death of the listicle, by the way. But anyway, I think nature, clickbait. I'd like more meaningful messages. I've been loving listening to all, my co-panelists today. It's so interesting. But I'd say nature. We're really looking for really meaningful connections with nature. We need it. We've learned how much as human beings we're connected to nature. So I think those hotels that really connect us to that.
Yeah, I'd say from our point of view, we are already seeing resonance with camping, caravanning, outdoors, so hiking, beaches, remote parts of Australia. So people are interested in Australia because I think they know that that's tantalisingly close in terms of a travel opportunity. And so, and they know everyone's got a car. It's a very easy and straightforward a trip that they can go on. But we've been posting some old pieces just kind of to experiment to see what is resonating. And you know what? People are reading everything. People are reading about Japan. They're reading about, best bars around the world. They don't seem to be discriminating, and I don't know whether that's just because they're taking a fix from anything that they possibly can about travel, but certainly for the immediate future, for what they're looking for and the content we're creating, it is domestic road trips and then anything in that Australia-New Zealand bubble.
Agreed. For us, and again, we have a Southeast Asian audience primarily. So that will remain our focus, and we'll dive deeper into, domestic travel options for the various countries within our remit, and interregional as that opens up, as these travel corridors open up. I imagine we would be looking at Vietnam. Well, we are actively sort of on the lookout for Vietnam stories, Taiwan, South Korea to a degree. I think Japan will recover, maybe not Tokyo per se, but trips into the Japanese countryside or hinterland. I imagine there will be good demand for that. We've always traditionally had a lot of interest in Japan among our readers. So yeah, those kind of stories, and perhaps, not so much urban stories, best restaurants, best bars, etc., but remoter, but still accessible destinations that also have good health and transport infrastructure.
Yeah, I think travelers are going to look for lower density destinations, more remoteness, more islands and villas, right? Private villas and destinations with high emphasis on safety and health. I think that's a priority now that everyone is very, very interested in. Like, what is the government doing for each individual country? How safe are we? How are the health workers, et cetera, et cetera? So, I mean, yeah, it goes back to the news, but I think on your note there will definitely be lower density destinations for sure.
And under tourism.
Yeah.
Excellent thoughts. And, we can end the session off by asking each of you if you have any messages, because you are all in many ways influencers in your own rights, obviously through publications or through shows, through the work that you do. But do you have any thoughts, any messages you want to send out to both the traveling public as well as the stakeholders within the travel sector?
Oh, that's a big call.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say that I think that initially I'm looking for reassurance. So that would be my number one for the industry. The more information I have about health and safety measures that they're putting into place, I think the more comfortable I will be in choosing their brand, recommending their brand, and educating our audiences around, safely and sort of freely taking on the world again. Any cleaning is really what I want to know about, and I want to see a video, and I want to see somebody in the room picking up whatever it is that I might pick up later down the track. Are they going to take my temperature when I walk in the door of the hotel or into the airport? How will we sit on a plane? What will a cruise look like? And so that would be my first message. The second one would be, we have found this time to be, many of us, very peaceful and very introspective, and but we want to be in touch with other people in the world, and and I think more than ever we know that everyone's pretty much equal. This virus doesn't discriminate, as they say, and so I just want to make sure that we don't get to the point where I don't know, where it creates an unnecessary barrier in our minds, even after we know that there's a vaccine or something to protect us from the virus itself. But let's keep an open mind.
I would just tell people to travel safe and travel wisely. Don't fly as often, stay longer, be generous when you're there, and yeah.
I would say never take travel for granted again.
Mm-hmm.
Those experiences are valuable and so precious now, and we're really going to have to apply that mindfulness towards travel, and we're all in this together. So I would never take this for granted again, especially as a travel presenter, because I've been on the road for 10 years and I never even thought about it. So now I'm looking at all of my films that I made over the 10 years and wish I could experience a river again, or climb a mountain, or just dive into the ocean. All those precious experiences, I'll never take that for granted again. So I hope people won't take their travel stories for granted either.
Well, I would just urge people to really think about how they can use their travels as a force for good. And every single time they have a transaction or an exchange, how are they having a positive impact socially? How are they helping people? Even if it's just spreading good vibes and good messages and engaging and empowering local communities. So I would just ask people to think a little bit more. Every single time you spend anything, as we always say, it's a vote for the world you want tomorrow. So that would be all I say.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Those are great words. I think that hopefully our friends in the sector and people that are watching will take to heart. I want to thank all of you for your time. This has been really great to see all your faces, to chat with all of you, to hear from you about what's happening in the sector, and to hear your own opinions. Thank you again very much. And for everyone who's watching, please tune in next week. Next week, we will have Tripadvisor Talk hosted by my colleague, Jane Lim, who will be talking to people in the food services and technology and delivery sort of companies, looking at how they have coped with the pandemic. Some of those companies have succeeded, innovated, some of them have stuttered. I think it'll be a really exciting chat. But for you guys, for Chris, Denise, Juliet, Jana, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Be safe. Take care.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.